Cool. So I've done a few messages before, a bunch if you count like the home group ones. I've done like some junior high, some Mission 910. And like writing a message, you always like come with like a message title. That's like pretty cool. You think it's like really cool. And then you find out it's kind of lame, so you don't really like share what the title is of your message is. You just get right into it. I'm actually going to share the title of mine. It's not cool, but it's important that you know what the title of it is. And it is called Diligently Growing in Wealth. Okay, now why would I share that? One, because I'm a little nervous talking about this because I know this is a very hot topic issue. And I also know the Bible warns a lot about pursuing wealth, loving money, just desiring it. And so why I brought up the title of my message, because I actually spent a good amount of time trying to decide on that. And I chose the words diligent. I was going to choose ambitious. I chose growing. I was going to use the word pursuing. I chose wealth, and I was originally going to use the word like prosperity or prosperous. But I settled on these three. And the reason it took me so long is, like I said, I want to be very sober about what I'm talking about, why I'm talking about this with you guys. And so all that to say is this isn't just some prosperity gospel message that you're going to get richer if you do this. This was pretty carefully planned. David and I went through it a few times. And we think it's going to be of good use for you, but I do want to let that out there that this was very soberly considered. So if you don't know about this website called Reddit, you are very fortunate. But if you do, you know it's kind of a problem. And for work, unironically, I go on Reddit probably 10 times a day, maybe at work. And so if you don't know, I'm an engineer just right down the street. And you would just be surprised how many super specific, very, very useful Reddits you can find yourself in if you have like a very specific answer you're looking for. So for those of you that do happen to be on Reddit every now and then, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't go on Reddit. Save yourself the time. But why I even bring that up is because if you're not careful, sometimes you can end up on what's called r/popular. And what that is that is not the super specific solution I was looking for. That is just Reddit, just everything stripped away from Reddit. Here is what the culture and the people and the identity of Reddit is. So if you're not careful, sometimes I accidentally find myself here, r/popular. You come across like just the most popular subreddits that Reddit has to offer. And you'll come across stuff like, well, first before I even get to what you come across, you're going to see stuff about money and wealth. You're going to see stuff about rich people. You're going to see stuff about all these kinds of things. And it's not good what people say about money, wealth, rich people, ambitiously pursuing things, having goals. It's not very, very flattering. You're going to come across things like r/anti-work, so people that don't want to work. You're going to come across things like r/eat the rich. That one's kind of entertaining, but it's just a terrible place to be. You're going to come across things like r/fluent in finance, which is basically just an anti-money page, which is kind of ironic because it's fluent in finance. But pretty quickly, you're going to understand that a place like Reddit, which, you know, it's kind of funny we're even talking about it. Like, why are you talking about Reddit for a message? But you'll find stuff like social media, Reddit, is pretty indicative of what the world is going to think about something. If you go to Unfiltered, if you go to what the popular things are, you're going to find what the world's attitude about stuff generally is. And on something like Reddit, that's just one example, but you can go anywhere to find this. Kind of the understanding about wealth and earning money and becoming ambitious and pursuing like well-paying careers and stuff, it's not good. Like the attitude towards it is typically don't work unless you're going to personally benefit from it. Like if your employer asks you to work overtime, don't do it unless they're going to pay you. You'll hear stuff like wealthy people only abuse poor people. They don't ever help poor people. So if you have money, that means you're going to abuse the people that don't have money. You're also going to hear things like you're destined to work yourself to the bone for barely a living wage. It doesn't matter what you're going to do. You're barely going to make enough money to get by, and you're going to spend all your time doing it. So is it even worth it? It's pretty bleak. And I think all of us in here could agree that's pretty bleak. And I bring this up because, you know, I've been here at Young Adults, it used to be called Common Ground, for about 10 years now, I think. Pretty long time. And I've noticed that this attitude was not present 6 to 8 to 10 years ago in people our age, well, your guys' age. I've actually kind of noticed this attitude is seeping a little bit into young adults. I've noticed the Ambition is a little lower. The desire to work extra hard, earn more money, grow, be ambitious. It's just a little bit down. And I don't actually blame us for this. We're just inundated with this all the time. And so I don't actually blame you if you have that view about working, money, wealth. If you hold those, I don't actually blame you because that's all you're going to hear from the world. But fortunately, as Christians, we have a different view. It's amazing that we can have a different view on a situation than the world does. And we should, because we have a different worldview. We believe Jesus is Christ. He died, he rose again. He has victory over all things. And we believe that he's going to come back and restore his kingdom on this earth. And one of the best parts of that is he's giving us the ability to establish his kingdom before he comes back and does it for good. It's a fantastic thing to be. And at the core of this message, we're going to talk about wealth because that's just an easy one to bring up, and I think that's one that makes sense to a lot of people. But we're going to be talking about fighting being stagnant, or fighting not having ambition, not being diligent, kind of just waiting for things, kind of just not pursuing something, not going after something, not trying to accomplish something. We're talking about fighting against that. Like I said, we're going to talk about wealth just because it's an easy one. It is important, but the heart of the message is that. And to go with that, the heart of the encouragement of this message is be diligent, even be ambitious. Pursue things that are going to help you expand the kingdom. So that's the heart of this. All right. So I'm going to encourage you to be ambitious. I'm going to encourage you to grow in wealth. I'm going to encourage you to be diligent. And naturally, if we're going to start doing this, we're going to become doers and not just sayers. We're going to become producers and not just consumers, because that's just how the world works. If you produce and you achieve, naturally, wealth is going to come with that. And it's kind of hard for me to describe to you what God's going to call you to be diligent in. I can't tell you that this person, you need to be diligent in doing this because God told me that you need to do that. I can't do that. But fortunately, I have scripture that can back this up, and I can actually comment on how you are going to do something. Right? You're going to be diligently pursuing something. I can't tell you if it's good or wrong to do that, or I can't tell you if you're going down the right path or not, but I can tell you, hey, you're doing this in a certain way. Scripture says that's good. Scripture says that's bad. And so it's important we start from here rather than getting into like the nitty-gritty of like, how do you be diligent? How do you pursue wealth? How do you grow? We first have to start with why are you even doing that? And so I want to just start with a quick analogy. So I took off my wedding ring. It's a metal wedding ring, and I took it off for an object lesson. It's kind of weird, like, why do you take off your wedding ring in front of a bunch of people? But this is a pretty like neutral scenario for me to take off my wedding ring. Like no one's thinking anything really about it. I can take it off. I can put it back on. It's kind of neutral. Might be a little awkward, but mostly neutral. Now, another scenario, I'm at work, and like I said, I'm an engineer, so I work around a lot of like heavy equipment, very powerful equipment. If I take off my ring and put it on the table, it's actually a wise thing to do at work. And Jonathan, wherever Jonathan is, he will attest to this. Anytime you're going to be working with heavy equipment, heavy machinery, you take off all your metal jewelry, especially around your hands. Trust me, your finger's going to come off before the ring comes off. I will just tell you that much right now. So this scenario, me taking off my ring is a wise thing to do. Okay, third scenario. I'm on a work trip, going out to a social hour at a bar. I'm not near any of my family. I'm not near any of my mentors. I'm kind of just out in a city by myself. And I take off my wedding ring and I walk inside. I think you guys would agree that's kind of a sketchy thing to do. So I just did one action. There's a neutral, there's a good, and there's a bad. I'm doing the same action in all of them, but depending on the situation and my intent behind doing it, it's going to be deemed wise or it's going to be deemed foolish. Why do I even bring that up? If we could go to Matthew 6, 1 through 4. It says, "Take care not to practice your righteousness in the sight of people, to be noticed by them. Otherwise you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. So when you give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in synagogues and on the streets, so that they will be praised by people. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your charitable giving will be in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." I think that's it. Okay, guys, this is a pretty common teaching from Jesus, and it's basically like, hey, you're going to go in, these hypocrites, these Pharisees, they were going into the streets, and they were showing off all the cool things they did, And the people were like, you guys are great. This is awesome. Jesus was saying, if you're doing that, that's your reward right there. Like, good job. So Jesus says the counter to that is don't even let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Why? Because God, who sees everything, is going to reward you. And so why would I even bring this up? Because as I'm encouraging you to be ambitious, to be diligent, to pursue wealth, one thing we have to ask ourselves is, am I doing this because of the internal working God is doing in me? Or am I doing this because of external factors? And can we bring up the 1 Corinthians verse, actually? According to the grace of God, which was given to me, like a wise master builder, I laid a foundation, and another is building on it. But each person must be careful how he builds on it. Keep going. For no one can lay a foundation other than the one which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, each one's work will become evident. For the day will show it, because it is to be revealed with fire, and the fire itself will test the equality of each one's work. If anyone's work which he has built on it remains, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss. But he himself will be saved, yet only so as through fire. And guys, don't be fooled. Don't deceive yourselves. Don't deceive God, first of all. You can't trick anybody. You can, well, I'll take that back. You can probably trick me. You can probably trick your home group pastor. You can probably trick David if you're good enough. But you can't trick God. And so if we're going to get serious about diligence and ambition, we have to look at what our heart is about. We have to. We can't trick anyone. We can't trick God, especially. We have to look and see, is our heart right when we're doing this? If it's not, don't even do it. And so I'm going to encourage you to have ambition to grow, but I'm going to emphasize two things. The godly skill we need to practice, that's the first thing, and then the character fault we need to avoid if we're going to do this good. And so growing in wealth is not the most important aspect of our Christian walk. That just is what it is. It's not the most important. But especially us living in America, we have a pretty good opportunity before us to increase wealth, to be ambitious, to grow, and for the one reason that's most important above all, to expand the kingdom in a way that we couldn't before. So I kind of touched on it a little bit. At the end of the message, I'll really go into why I think us as Christians can have a great impact for the kingdom if we do grow in wealth. I'm gonna close with that. But I just want to hit on a few things, why I think it's good that we do this, why I think it's good we try to start being diligent, we try to be ambitious, we try to grow. And so one of the first ones is you increase your influence, right? Not all influence is going to come from wealth. Like money's not gonna buy you everything. But I can't help think of the book of James. Like I said, it was my favorite book earlier. I can't help but think of when James is basically, he's basically chiding the Christians because they would see someone who had a need and they would say, oh, bless you, like you be blessed. And then they would kind of just send them on their way without actually fulfilling their need, right? How shameful, not shameful, how unfortunate is it if we're in a spot where we can bless someone, but because we haven't been diligent, because we've made some poor decisions, because we've, fill in the blank, like we can bless them with prayer, but we can't actually fulfill their need for groceries. So we can't fulfill their need for gas. We can't fulfill their need for clothes. And so having an increase in wealth is not going to make you a better Christian automatically. It's going to increase your influence. You're going to be able to reach more people. If you fulfill a need because you have the money to do so, you're going to be able to speak more into their lives because you've already done something for them. All right, and I want to push a little bit of urgency on this tonight. I think we need to seriously consider this. And I'm not like bashing anybody. Just go home, take a good look at your own heart, take a good look at your own motives. But seriously consider being urgent, being diligent, looking to grow in wealth. And can we bring up the Proverbs 13:22 verse? It says, a good person leaves an inheritance to his grandchildren. The wealth of a sinner is stored up for the righteous. This is like a cool verse. People throw up now and then. It's a great proverb. But there's something really exciting in there. It says, the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. And there's just something practical about living on earth. Like money is going to be in the world no matter what. Wealth is just going to be in the world no matter what. But if we are to believe this proverb, then money that rests with the wicked is just waiting to be snatched up by us, by the righteous. And how can this happen if we're not pursuing it? How can this happen if we don't have diligence, if we don't have ambition, if we don't desire to increase wealth? How can we take this money that is currently with the sinners and how can we bring it to the righteous? So I encourage you, seriously consider this. It's one of those things, even if you're not going to be earning more now, like this topic is about wealth in a sense, but even if you're not going to be earning more wealth now, you still have an urgency to be diligent, develop the skills, work through spiritual hindrances you have, grow in ambition, right? Because this is what could happen. We could get the wealth of the sinner and we can bring it home to the kingdom and we can use it to expand it. That's what we could do. I just want to point out right now, we're not talking about salvation issues. Like, we're not talking about, oh, everyone is equal in God's eyes. You know, everyone has an equal opportunity to Jesus. Everyone has an equal chance to be saved. That is all true, and I will tell you that is true if you brought that up to me. We're talking about distribution of wealth right now in the U.S. Either the Christians have it or the Christians don't have it. It's kind of black and white like that. And my encouragement to you is be ready to grab it. If you have the chance, be ready. That's why I'm encouraging you to be diligent and be ambitious. If you see the chance to outwork your atheist coworker and get the promotion they were going to get, that might sound a little weird from like a salvation issue, but if we're just talking about taking the wealth that's in the sinner's hands and bringing it to the righteous hands, do it. Outwork that person and get their promotion. Take the money. Why? Because what are you going to use it for? You're going to use it for sponsoring kids to go to camp. You're going to use it for paying for a widow's groceries. You're going to use it for stuff like that. And I'm not going to bash this metaphorical atheist person, but they're not going to use it for that. So all of us in here should desire to work. We should desire to advance in careers, jobs, wherever we're at right now. If you don't have a job, you should be desiring to get a job. If you're willing to go for it, maybe even venture off on your own business. We should have these desires to do that. Because we need more Christian personal trainers, engineers, teachers, graphic designers, fill in the blank with whatever career you can think of. We need more Christian blank. It's just simple. And we need you, if you are going to be that Christian fill in the blank, we need you to be acquiring some wealth. Why? Not so you can just spend it on frivolous things, but because you can go and spend it on the kingdom and do good with it. And so you might ask, does not the Bible teach that God will work with incredibly small inputs from his people and do incredibly amazing things? Yes, God will. I'll give you that. God will do that. I believe God will do that. I've seen God do that. But let's be careful not to use that as an excuse. If you're saying, God's going to do amazing things with the little I can bring, that's not an excuse not to do anything, right? So let's not fall into that trap. So we're going to get into some like pretty practical stuff here. We're going to go through Scripture and really, I think, get a good biblical understanding of how and what to pursue when you're trying to do this. But I do want to throw out a few quick caveats because, like I said, David and I were very, very, very considerate of what we were going to be talking about, and so I do want to throw some stuff out there. So Scripture does warn us it warns us more than encourages us to pursue stuff like wealth, money, riches, prosperity. It does warn us more than encourage us. And we would be wise to consider that and really have a sober mentality regarding this. Like, if this message is probably not going to be for everybody. It's probably not going to convict everybody. But if it does convict you, don't just run off and start doing stuff. Because the Bible does have a very sober mentality, sometimes a negative mentality about money, and we're going to have a sober mentality about it. So does that mean we shouldn't do it? For some of you, you shouldn't do it. Greed might be a little too strong of an influence in your life. There might be concerns about moral compromises if you start pursuing this kind of stuff. There's a possibility your increase in wealth will drive you away from God, not towards God. It'll drive you away from his kingdom, not towards his kingdom. If that's you, don't do it. I can't tell you if that's you, but if that is you, don't do it. For some of you, it's probably not going to be a problem. Right? Greed is not that strong of an influence. You're confident. You're not naive. You're not arrogant. You're confident that you can increase wealth, you can be ambitious, you can pursue goals while retaining your biblical view of money, while retaining a humble, God-fearing attitude. Right? You're not worried that you increasing wealth is going to drive a wedge between you and God. Right? You're not worried that you're going to all of a sudden be stingy with it. You're pretty confident that as you get more, you're going to give more to the kingdom. If you find that to be you, then great. Start pursuing it. Start thinking, what are the next steps in this? So that was caveat 1. Caveat 2 is some of us in here are just going to choose a career path. God's going to call you to a career that's just not well-paying. It is what it is. Okay? So I don't take this message as a knock on you if you're going to be pursuing something that is not well-paying. right? That's not the mentality of this at all. Right? God's going to call you into his will, and you should diligently follow it. So yeah, maybe the wealth part might be a little bit much for you. Might not apply as much, but there's diligence there still. There's ambition there still. Right? If you're a teacher, you can still be diligent and ambitious as a teacher. You might have some trade-offs for money, but that's the path God's called you on. And so the last one I kind of want to bring up before we get into like the practical stuff is this message is probably not a universal message. I would just tell, like if I met a Christian in a very poor country, very, very oppressed, I probably wouldn't give this message to him. Just gonna be straight up about it. Why I'm giving it to us tonight, the young adults of El Cajon, California, U.S., is because we're fortunate enough to have the option to grow in wealth, to be diligent, to pursue things. Like we have that option. Some Christians don't. And so for us, like let's make the most of that option, that opportunity that we have before us. And so fortunately, if we do this right, we're going to expand the kingdom. That's the goal. And so for anything I say, probably moving forward, you can you can counter it with, aren't we eternally wealthy in God? Doesn't all wealth on this earth belong to God? You're absolutely right. However, eternally wealthy in Christ is, I would argue, the base with which you're going to operate from. That's not going to be your excuse. That's going to limit how much drive and commitment and ambition and diligence you're going to put into this life. So let's not use that to limit us. Let's use the fact that we have the eternal God on our side to go out and try to create amazing things for his kingdom. Just a few quick caveats. Okay, now let's get into a little bit of the practical. We're doing good on time here. And so I mentioned earlier before in the message, I'm going to emphasize a skill we all need to practice if we're going to do this. I'm going to emphasize a character fault that we might fall into if we don't do this right. So the skill is honest and generous stewardship, and the fault is greed. It's pretty straightforward. But what is greed? I just want to touch on it real quick. At its core, I think greed is just an improper relationship we have to money. And that could be for whatever reasons. Growing up, maybe your parents had a weird relationship with it, so you just adopted it. Maybe for whatever reason, you've always just been attracted to wealth for improper reasons. But greed is just an improper relationship with money. And usually, at least for me, I'm not going to out any of you all, out myself. If I'm greedy, it's because I find security in money. And that's the number one thing we're going to fight against. If we are going to be diligent, if we're going to be ambitious, we are going to fight against putting our security in money. And at least for me, I will propose tonight that greed, at least in part, is using your money to take what should be security in God and put it somewhere in the world that you think you can control. You probably can't control it, but at least you think you can. Another part of greed that, at least for me, pops up is greed is also placing material possessions as priority over expanding the kingdom of God. And so I've been guilty of both of those. Fortunately, I've had people that have checked me on that. Yeah, I've been guilty of it. Don't assume you're not going to fall guilty of it. And so the question is it right to want to grow in wealth? Is it right to be diligent? Is it right to be ambitious? Is it right to have goals? Is it right to pursue great things for the kingdom? Our motive behind this, and kind of why I brought up that little ring object lesson earlier, is our motive is going to tell us what is right and what is wrong. Usually the action is not necessarily neutral, but you can do the same thing and have it be like, oh, that's a good reason, and then, oh, no, that's a terrible reason. So our motive is really going to be what's going to answer this question. Is it right for you to want to pursue these things? So yes, if, and so this is not 100% of the reasons you should be doing, you believe in Proverbs 11:4, let's bring that up. Riches do not benefit on the day of wrath, but righteousness rescues from death. If you believe that, I wholeheartedly believe that, I think that's a pretty good sign that you can pursue this. Another one is you understand all wealth belongs to God anyways. We kind of touched on that. Kind of ties into that as well. I say another good indicator that you might want to pursue this is you focus on the eternal significance of your efforts, not just the significance that it has on earth. So that was yes. Now, should you do it? No. If, and like I said, this is not 100% encompassing, but if you could bring up You can bring up Luke 12:31 through 21. Do you have that one? Yeah. This is a parable. Jesus says, "Now someone in the crowd asked him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me.' But he said to him, 'You there, who appointed me a judge or arbitrator over the two of you.' But he said to them, 'Beware and be on guard against every forms of greed, for not even one who is affluent does his life consist of his possessions.' And he told them a parable, saying, 'The land of a rich man was very productive, and he began thinking to himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops?' And he said, This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and I will store all my grain and my goods there. And I'll say to myself, You have many goods stored up for many years to come. Relax, eat, drink, enjoy yourself.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your soul is demanded of you, and as for all that you have prepared, who will own it now?' Such is the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich in relation to God." I think verse 19 there is probably the key. And it's kind of the top sentence right there. It says, and this is the rich man saying, "And I will say to myself, you have many goods stored up for many years to come. Relax, eat, drink, enjoy yourself." And so this is a point in this parable where the rich man, he builds all this stuff. He has wealth, so he builds bigger barns to store it in. Then he tells himself, okay, now that I have this, I can relax. I can be happy. I can be secure. Some of you have that relation with money. Oftentimes I kind of have it too. I think everybody's going to have it in some sense, but some of us struggle with it real bad. Like you can't find security, you can't be at peace unless you have a pretty big savings account. So if that's you, do not try to grow in wealth. Do not do it. So Proverbs 21:22, do we have that one also? So this is like a little subpoint of this. Is a wise person scales the city of the mighty and brings down the stronghold in which they trust. So I'm telling you not to pursue wealth, but what this proverb is telling us is wise people, they target the strongest thing first. The thing that people place security in first, they target it and they bring it down. So then they can go, in this parable, conquer the rest of the city. If you struggle with finding just security from money and not God, like instead of diligently pursuing wealth and advancement so you can do things for the kingdom, diligently pursue tearing down that stronghold. Use mentors, use Bible, or use Scripture, use your home group pastors. Have them help you tear that down. Because that is, in this conversation, that's the biggest stronghold you're going to come up against. And it says here, a wise person scales the city and tears that thing down first. So I encourage you, do that. So another reasons why you probably shouldn't pursue wealth, you probably shouldn't diligently pursue it, is you can't do so with a godly character. Like you compromise your morals by doing it. That's a good reason not to. And then another one is you focus on just how significant your wealth increase will be in this life, and you don't think about how significant your wealth increase can be for eternal factors, like bringing more people into the kingdom. And so if you find yourself saying yes to a few of those things that we just brought up, maybe pump the brakes, but don't lose diligence. Don't lose ambition. Don't lose drive. Like I said at the beginning, this message is more about fighting stagnation. And so wealth is an easy one to pursue, but if you're not there, don't just say, all right, I'll just wait until I'm there. No. Be ambitious. Tear down these strongholds so you can be in a spot to then do this and to then influence and expand the kingdom more. Am I losing any of you guys yet? You guys all still there? Real quickly, I want to just dispel 3 quick myths we have about wealth, especially as people living currently in this cultural climate. One myth is rich people are greedy. Therefore, I am greedy for wanting an increase to my wealth. That's not necessarily true. What is true is anyone who loves money more than God is going to be greedy. So that can be rich people. You can have no money and be way greedier than a wealthy person. It's just all dependent on, do you love God more or do you love your money more? Myth number 2 says, I will give away more money when I am richer. Therefore, I should wait until I am wealthier to give away more money. No, you're not going to do that. Just ask yourself this question. You make $50K a year and you don't give away $100. If all of a sudden you're making $5 million a year, are you going to give away $100,000? Probably not going to. And so what's the truth here? The truth here is as you practice giving away money, do it now. Don't wait until you do all this work to create wealth, to expand the kingdom. Don't think just because you have the money in the future that you're going to all of a sudden be way more generous. That's just not how it works. If you're generous and giving away money when you're not making much, as you make more, your generosity will grow with it. If you're very stingy with your money, it's not a switch that flips. It's a skill that you need to practice. And so even if you're not making much right now, be diligent in trying to find ways to give away money. That's the generous steward part of the skill we can practice. Myth number 3, it's more righteous to be poor than rich. I want to be righteous, therefore I should be poor. Truth is, rich or poor, it is more righteous to be holy than unholy. It doesn't matter about money. Money is not going to tell you if someone's righteous or unrighteous. Their desire to be holy was going to be a better indicator for that. Okay. All right, practical stuff now. How can we grow in wealth? I'm going to do practical side first, really nitty-gritty stuff, and then I'm going to do godly character side after that. Because I've hopefully convinced you it's a good thing to want to do this. I've hopefully warned you well enough to not pursue it with improper motives. But now I just want to give you some tools to work with. So on the practical side, one thing we can do is provide more value. So let's pull up that Proverbs 14:4. It says, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but much revenue comes by the strength of the ox. Yeah, guys, money's going to come in based on how good the ox is. And so for you, money's going to come in based on how much value you provide. Like I said, this is not a salvation issue. I'm not telling you if you have better skills, you are more valuable in the eyes of God, the eternal significance. But growing in wealth, providing value is going to be a good first step. Simply put, in terms of wealth, the more valuable you are, the more you will make. The more value you can provide your employer, or if you have your own business, the more value you can provide your customer, the more you're going to make. And if we are to do all things under the glory of God, what better way for us than to produce exceptional results at what we're doing? If you're a barista, be the best possible barista you can be. If you're a teacher, be the best teacher you can be. All right, if you have this desire to provide exceptional value for the glory of God, that's incredible. And then when we get to the godly character, if you have a godly character to go along with that, dude, that's game-changing right there. So that was one tip. Another one, be diligent. So Proverbs 14:23, let's bring that one up. Wait, did I skip one? Okay, could you just go to there you go. So in all labor there is profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Can we bring up, actually just pull up the next two Proverbs verses. The naive believes everything, but the sensible person considers his steps, and then there should be one more. The lazy one buries his hands in the dish, but will not even bring it back to his mouth. Those aren't very flattering, but they are true. Be diligent, as it says in the first Proverbs. If you just talk about it and you don't be diligent and do it, it's not going to lead to much. And so another thing to go with that is the naive people believe everything, but sensible people consider their steps. Don't just do anything. Be wise, talk to mentors, talk to leaders about what you are going to do, and then do it. Don't just run ahead of the curve here. Then the last one, I think it said the lazy one. Yeah, lazy one buries his hand in the dish, but won't even bring it back up to his mouth. Yeah, that one's pretty intense. But all this just ties into, like, if you have the desire to do it, but you don't have the diligence to go out and actually do it, there's a little bit of a gap there that you need to work on. Okay, next one is do not get into debt. And with that, I don't have the Proverbs reference there, but in Proverbs you will find the proverb, the borrower is slave to the lender. Right? Debt sometimes just happens. Like I had medical debt with my first son. It just happens. Is what it is. But most of us will have debt because we aren't stewarding stuff well. We'll make purchases that we don't have money for. We will hastily make big purchases. We push off responsibility until later, throw stuff on credit cards, say government's going to relieve it, we'll just wait until that time comes. But there's a truth there. You're hampered in your ability to expand the kingdom if you're carrying a lot of debt. I'm just going to say it. Like if I can't give to people because I have to give to the credit card companies, I think it's a pretty clear example of wealth going to, I'm not calling them sinners, but let's do the principle here. If I'm giving my money to credit card companies because I have to pay off interest versus giving my money to the widow that needs groceries, that might be a clear example of wealth going to sinners versus going to righteous. So I'll just encourage you, if you carry debt, sometimes it just happens. I don't want you to be like ashamed of it if it's medical debt, if you got in a car accident or any of that stuff. But yeah, being a good steward is making sure your money can go where it should go. Don't let your money be tied up with things that could have been avoided, right? Let your money be able to flow to where the kingdom needs it. And so last one on the practical side is understand this is not going to be an overnight success. So can you bring up Proverbs 20:21? It says, an inheritance gained in a hurry at the beginning will not be blessed in the end. I don't know the exact stat, but it's incredible how many lottery winners actually go broke. Like people who won hundreds of millions of dollars wind up with no money. I think the stat is 5 years. After 5 years, I think it's like 60%, 70%. Don't quote me on that, but it's way more than it should be. Like you think you are an overnight 100 millionaire because you won the lottery. You think you're set for life. But that's just not how it works. And that ties into the point earlier when we were kind of talking about I'll start giving more money. I'll start being more generous when I'm wealthy. It's the same idea here. If you're not going to be faithful with the little money you have right now, like don't expect to be faithful as you're getting more money, right? And so the encouragement here is no matter how much money you have, you can be faithful right now. You can be faithful to tithe. You can be faithful to give money to people that need it. You can be faithful to practice detaching your security from it because it's only going to get harder when you have more money. And so if you aren't practicing now, you might be in a world of hurt when some more money comes in. Okay, godly character side. Kind of mentioned it earlier, detach your sense of security from your wealth. If you're not going to be gaining more wealth right now, at least diligently detach your sense of security from it. And to do that, give generously. So we're not going to read it, but in Mark 12:41-44, it's the parable of the very poor widow who comes up and drops basically like a cent in the offering pot. And then Acts 5:1-11, it's the story of when these two people, Ananias and Sapphira, they sell their land and they go and pretend to be completely generous with all their money, but they hold some of it back. And so those are two counterexamples of what we can be. Are we going to be people who are generously giving even when we really can't give, it really doesn't make sense to give? Or are we going to be people who we have the ability to give X amount, but we only give half of that? Which person are you going to be? Proverbs 11:25-26, let's bring that up real quick. So a generous person will be prosperous, and one who gives others plenty of water will himself be given plenty. One who withholds grain, the people will curse him. I believe there's another one, 11:24. There's one who scatters and yet increases all the more, and there's one who withholds what is justly due, and yet it results in only their poverty. Kind of what's going on here, the more we hold on to stuff and withhold from the kingdom, the less prosperous we're going to be. This is not prosperity gospel. I'm not going to tell you tithe and you'll all of a sudden be rich. That's not what I'm doing here. But the more generous you are, to use the word in the proverb, the more you water, the more you will be watered. So I'll just encourage you. It's another encouragement in this give generously to really consider doing it. And really consider if what you're giving is everything you can give or are you holding something back. And just know, I'm not telling you what to give to. I'm not telling you, hey, give it all to Foothills or give it all to X. Like I'm not going to put that weird pressure on you, but I'm going to kind of hopefully convict you a little bit to assess, one, are you even giving money away? And two, are you giving everything that you think God is calling you to? So another thing on the godly character side is always do honest business. And so I'll just read through a few quick proverbs. It says, wealth obtained by fraud dwindles, but the one who gathers by labor increases it. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Bread obtained by falsehood is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel. You might win for a little bit doing sketchy stuff, being dishonest, especially if you own a business, doing some weird stuff, but not in the long term. Right? We read earlier, you can't trick God. If you're going to be growing in wealth, but it's not honest, it's not God-fearing, that's going to burn up in the end. And we read in these proverbs that if you obtain stuff in fraudulent ways, don't expect to be wealthy in the long term. So I encourage you, you might have this desire, you're like, I need to be diligent, I need to try to grow in this. If you're not doing honest business, don't even do it. And so a little personal story, and then we'll kind of go into the last section, is, so at work, obviously I'm a salaried employee, but something I do at work is I do a little bit of duties that aren't typically what an engineer will do, but I just happen to be, at the time I was just the one person that could do it. And so I went to my employer, and I said, hey, this is kind of taking time out of my normal duties. Can I just do this at home, and I'll send you an invoice, basically like overtime, and then you can just bill that to clients. And it'll be like, I don't have to do it during the day. I can do engineering stuff, but a chance for me to make a little money, a chance for them to make a little money. So it was a good deal. But there's something in there where I get to see contracts, like how much they're worth, how much they have budgeted for line item one. And if I know I'm going to be if I know I'm going to be working on line item one, okay, they have $6,000 budgeted for that. Takes me 2 hours to do it, so let's just say $100. But I know they have 6,000 in there, so I can just say, oh, it took me 8 hours to do it, or it took me 12 hours to do it. Because now I can bill $500, and that's not even going to put a dent in their $6,000 budget, but that's not honest. And so that temptation is there. And so practically, that scenario is not going to apply to you specifically, but if you do have something where a temptation to be dishonest is there, and you can't overcome it, don't pursue wealth. Don't do it. It's not going to be worth it. We need long-term wealth. And we just read fraudulence leads to only short-term gain, but it will not lead to long-term. So just a little bit of a warning there for you. Okay, so now I just want to, in just the last few minutes before we bring the band back up, I just kind of want to just cast a vision for, how we can expand the kingdom if we're wealthier, if we're diligent, if we're ambitious. I kind of mentioned on it earlier that I would close with this, and here it is. So this might have been before a lot of you were actually here, but probably 3 years ago. David, when was the fundraiser for the sonogram machine or ultrasound machine? 2021. So yeah, it was springtime, I believe. So almost 3 years ago now, we held a fundraiser to buy a new, I think it was ultrasound machine for a pregnancy care clinic. And we had people from young adults donated money, but we also held a concert where people could buy prizes and such. And we did it. We raised enough money to give this pregnancy care center an ultrasound machine. But guys, how great would it be if in 3 years, 4 years, whatever the number is, if the next time a pregnancy care center needs that machine, if just us could do it? How great would it be if we didn't even have to throw a concert? We didn't even have to get people to raffle off prizes. If I could say we need $20K for this machine, and actually who wants to volunteer to give money, and like 40 hands go up. Boom, got the money. How great would that be? How great would it be if one of you in here could sponsor 20 kids to go to youth camp per camp, so 2 camps a year, every single year? How great would that be? How great would that be if you do like a youth venture group, these kids can't pay for it. You're like, okay, I have 20 spots. You tell Bryce, who's the youth venture pastor, I have enough money for 20 spots. Fill them up. How great would that be? How great would it be if one of you in here could send a pastor in Kenya through pastor training for a whole year? My wife and I, we did that. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's not that expensive. It was $600. Most of us in here could come up with $600. But how great, me and my wife were talking, how great would it be if we could send 5 pastors each year through that training? What am I going to spend $2,400 on that isn't more worth it than sending a pastor in Kenya through pastor training so they can go get more Kenyans saved? How great would it be if one of you in here, or all of us in here actually, could show the world what honest, generous, wealthy Christian businessmen and women look like? How many of you in here, I kind of mentioned, stupid Reddit, I kind of mentioned Reddit at the beginning. It's just nasty view of wealth. Wealth is terrible. Wealthy people are terrible. How great would it be if all of us in here, or even a few of us in here, could be a counterexample to that? Say, no, this person did it right. This person was godly. This person has money. This person's generous. How great would it be if some of you in here could be that? How great would it be if our church is preceded by our reputation as generous and honest? A little newsflash, we already are. But how great would it be if specifically the young adults ministry has the same reputation? How great would it be if our head pastors would be like, oh man, we need to raise $15,000 for X. First place that goes us. How great would that be? How great would it be if every time someone asked me, hey, I need to do this thing, I need a business for this thing, and all I had to do is just come to one of you in here, because your landscaping, your construction, your graphic design, your fill in the blank. How great would it be if I didn't even have to go outside the church to find a business for fill in the blank? How great would it be if instead of paying that random company down the road, if we could pay one of you guys who's then going to be generous with that money? Can I have the band come up? So I don't want to get like too hypey or anything, because I don't know, that's just kind of cringy. But there is some genuine like excitement in these questions. And I hope that like stirs you a little bit, that like the possibility of what you could do with your extra money, what impact you could have on the kingdom. I hope that kind of stirs you a little bit, kind of gets you excited, at least makes you think about doing it. And so we're going to go into worship. Eventually, we'll do some ministry and pretty here soon. I just want to ask you just 3 questions before we do that. Number 1, are you diligent in your efforts to steward what God has given you? I told us the skill we need to practice is honest and generous stewardship. Are you a good steward of what God has given you? It's totally okay if you don't even know what that means. If you're like, I don't know what that means, so I don't know if I am or not. Come find someone. Come ask us. Have you lost a little bit of urgency to expand the kingdom? Have you lost a little bit of diligence? Like, sure, the world's been a crazy place the last 3 years. You might have lost a step or 2. Could you think back to a time when you were excited, ambitious, passionate, diligently working, and is that kind of gone now? Because the world kind of took that from you. Kind of last thing, and then if you guys could just stand real quick, we'll do worship soon, but just one last thing is, have you given up on, kind of ties into the previous question, have you given up on a business you wanted to start? Have you given up on advancing at your workplace? Have you given up on trying to earn more money, trying to secure promotions? If you find yourself answering yes to those kind of questions, I would just encourage you to, in ministry time, be sober about it, come before God, ask him to convict you, ask him to give you fresh desire for these things, fresh vision for these things. And if you answer yes to, or if you answer no to have you been diligent in your efforts to steward what God has given you, ask God to show you the places you can do better with. Because long story short, like us as the body of Christ, we need you guys to be doing this stuff. We need you guys to be diligently trying to expand the kingdom. The Bible says the harvest is very plentiful. The workers are very few. And so we talked about money tonight. I think that's good for us to talk about. But more importantly, I think the heart of this message is just increasing the amount of harvesters we have. You can't harvest if you're not diligent. You can't harvest if you aren't ambitious or pursuing things. You might do small stuff. But guys, the harvest is way, way, way bigger than the amount of workers we have. So I just want to encourage you, get that mentality. Ask God to make you a harvester. Ask God to increase your ability to go expand his kingdom. So I'm going to pray, and then we'll do some worship, and we'll get into it. Lord, just thank you for this group. God, thank you that, one, we have a chance to really practically just earn a lot of money to expand your kingdom. God, thank you that that is one avenue we have as young adults here right now. God, I ask that we would be diligent to start pursuing how we can expand your kingdom more. God, I ask you would show us new ways where we can be harvesters. God, I ask you would just convict us if we've been slacking. God, I ask you would just convict us if we, God, are just not being the stewards that we need to be. So, Lord, as we do ministry time, God, we ask that your Spirit would be here, God, and we ask that you would just begin working on our hearts, and God, that we would just come out of this time just excited that you give us the opportunity to expand your kingdom. In Jesus' name.